Hi, everyone, and good afternoon, and welcome to The Global Talk, which is our recently rebranded podcast. Many of you will have previously known our podcast as Scale Up Stateside, which was founded by PGC Group. This year, under our new brand of Workwell Global, which is the combined business of PGC, Six Cats, and Whitefin, we wanted to give the podcast an upgrade and shift our view to align with recruiting and doing business internationally. So if this is your first time listening, you are very, very welcome. But if you've been a regular listener of our podcast since rebranding or before that, then thank you for coming back once more. For those that don't know me, I am Amy Davies, Managing Director of Workwell Global. We specialise in supporting recruitment businesses and other businesses expand to international markets by providing employer of record services for their contractors and clients. We can help you scale your contract recruitment business quickly and drive overall enterprise value to your company through that. But today on our podcast, joining me, I have a very, very special guest and someone I'm really excited to have invited onto the show. It's someone who acts as a key contributor on outlets such as Sky News, where actually she appeared earlier this week. You did a great job on that, as well as BBC, CNN, and lots of others outlets today as well. She is the CEO of International Marketing and has advised more than 260 businesses in 27 countries, helping them profitably grow across different regions. So I would love to introduce you all to Allyson Stewart-Allen. Hello, Allyson.
Hello, Amy. Thank you so much for this invitation.
Oh, no, thank you so much for joining. Allyson, we met, about 6 to 8 months ago now. We were introduced by someone that we both know well in the industry. And I have to tell our audience that my first meeting with Allyson, I knew at that point I would have her on our podcast show at some point because her experience is unbelievable in terms of the businesses, the brands, the leaders that she's worked with globally to help people expand. So Allyson, thank you so much to finally be joining me as a guest on our podcast. We've got a lot to work through in the next 30 minutes. And so we are going to be covering what it takes to be a global leader, because one of the things that I've learned, and I can't wait to hear Allyson's views on this, is how the leader who leads the international expansion is intrinsically linked to long-term sustainable growth in international markets. So we're very much going to be touching on leadership, how to plan for expansion. So often those who fail to plan or fail to prepare, then often find that they will fail hard and fast pretty quickly. And also as part of that planning, what research has to play in that as well. And then very lastly, thinking about brand. It's often overlooked when people take brands into new markets and really thinking about, does my brand resonate on a global stage compared to maybe my home country where we established and grew that brand in? So 4 meaty topics to get through today. But if you've got any questions as we're talking, or maybe me or Allyson say something that triggers a thought or a comment that you would like to share, then as always, please drop them in the comment section. And we'll make sure to get through as many of those as possible without distracting from the agenda set before us. If you do ask a question and we don't get time to finish it, either I or Allyson will come back to you after the show, and whoever's most appropriate to answer it will make sure that we reach out. So, Allyson, that's all our housekeeping done. We've set the scene and the stage for today's show. So I thought it'd be great to start off just from that leadership point of view. It's something me and you have excitedly spoke about many times in the past, and about the skills that a leader needs to develop to effectively impact international growth. So tell us about your thoughts on this and let's get into it.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Amy. So it is a really meaty topic. And I think for listeners who are either working with international markets or are aspiring to, I think one of the things that's going to make or break your success is self-awareness. I think one of the things good leaders have is the ability to check themselves, to pay attention to how what they're doing or saying is landing in a different context. And I think, it's not just for international, by the way, that you need that capability. But generally, the people that are good at listening, that are aware of themselves when they're out of their comfort zone and out of the fish bowl and into a different fish bowl,
Yeah.
to adapt. I think that those things are really critical. And I guess uh, not being afraid to admit you may not know something.
Yeah.
So a degree of humility is really also critical for succeeding internationally, because you may not be an expert about some target international market. You may know a lot, but you could probably always learn more. And I think, being open to learning new things, being open-minded, suspending judgment, is really quite important. I think we tend to judge things. I mean, I often hear friends from outside the UK ask me what it's like to drive on the wrong side of the road. And you think, well, not the wrong side of the road, it's their side of the road. So it isn't wrong, but it does reveal a lot that they're clearly
Yeah.
judging it. So I think
Yeah.
there's some of the key things that will make people succeed internationally.
Definitely. And I think you're right. When I've spoken about, management and leadership generally, whether that be in one country or another, I always say self-awareness is the key actually to development and growth. Because if you're not aware of how you come across, how you're perceived, then you're not able to, change that in an impactful or meaningful way. So I totally agree with that. And even more so, it's, when you go into international markets, one of the things that I've learned, having managed American teams and then UK based teams for the last 4 years, and actually in the last 6 months now managing European teams as well, is to take your time to understand the culture. Because even if you speak the same language, sometimes we're not saying the same things. And if you come across that.
Well, having written a book called Working with Americans, uh, I have come across that. And, one of the challenges for leaders, whether it's the US or, as you said, Europe and all of the other markets that you are leading for Work Well Global, I think recognizing that there are other ways of doing things and accepting those and being curious about them and wanting to know how people relate to each other in other parts of the world,
Yeah.
how they think, how they make business cases. Is it more quantifiable data? Is it more qualitative data they use? More about how rules are enforced and honored or not honored. So I think if we understand other parts of the world and make the assumption that they are not like us, rather than make the assumption that they are like us, I think you probably put yourself in a stronger place.
Definitely. And what culture across different offices? If I give you an example, this is something as we've brought lots of different businesses together under the Workwell Global brand, who all had their own culture originally. So you have business culture, but then also local geographical culture by country. What would be your advice to leaders who are trying to almost have common strands of culture, no matter where the office is located, but also recognizing local culture is okay as well? What would your advice be around that area?
I think you need to have the mindset that you're trying to achieve both and. So
Mm-hmm.
how you do things maybe globally, plus how people do things locally and find the best of both.
Yeah.
And it's really important to adopt the both and rather than the either or mindset. And I think if you do that, you're able to integrate the best of global and local, or centralized and decentralized. And
Yeah.
that's a tension that is alive and well, probably for most of the people joining us today. The challenge of how do I take a concept or a leadership policy, corporate policy, or a brand, and get the best of what will work everywhere, and then allow people to localize where they can. I think just imposing a template which is inflexible, which often happens. Head office cooked up some great idea that supposedly is going to get rolled out across all of the offices, and actually it probably won't work for half of them. So recognizing that you can empower people in other regions and markets and
Yeah.
cultures to do
Yeah.
those adaptations, I think that's the route to success.
Yeah. I really love what you said there, Alison, about it's not all, it's and, global and local culture, and it's incorporating both into that, which I think is just so important to that intrinsic movement between countries and officers and teams of people in terms of bringing them all together under that one global vision. It's not easy, is it, leading a global business? What have you seen from the leaders that you worked with, as some of the biggest lessons that they've had to learn?
I think one of the biggest lessons is backing away to the humility point about good leaders. I think there's often an assumption that my way is the right way and your way is the
Mhm.
wrong way, and you should just, accept how I do it and just take this template or just impose it. I think recognizing that you can, strengthen the DNA of the company, of its products and services,
Yeah.
by integrating a variety of those cultural strands, but also, I guess, being a good listener. Rather than assuming you've got all the answers, I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, definitely. We have actually got a question. Hello, Greg. I know Greg really well. Greg's spoken to PGC, who support recruitment firms expand to America. And one of the things we've spoken about, Alison, is, when you identify your potential leader from your home country going over is about they have the DNA of the company built into them. And so Greg's asking, would you recommend that still be the case, that someone goes over to set it up, or that you recruit someone locally to start it out from scratch? What would your recommendation be for Greg?
Yeah. Well, my answer is you do both. So it's back to the both and. So yes, you should send someone who knows the business culture and the corporate culture from headquarters, and they work alongside the local hire and the local leader to
Yeah.
work business, because the risk otherwise is that the secondee, if that's international assignee, that person has to go up a big learning curve to understand how they make the culture from headquarters, adapt
Yeah.
that for that international market. Whereas
Yeah.
if you have the two together, then both are learning from each other.
Yeah.
So that's where I've seen it work really well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for answering that. We've got quite a few comments going on in the chat, people sharing their views, but on the main, it sounds like people who are commenting are very aligned with some of the things that we've been sharing. And lots of people talk about cultures built from leadership and the best leaders being able to inspire and motivate. So, and I think, interestingly, we were talking earlier this week internally about transactional leadership versus transformational leadership. And when you are growing a global business and going into new markets, you need transformational leaders who are able to set the vision, bring people on the journey to help get the business where it needs to. So thanks everyone for commenting, loving some of the comments that are in there. So we're going to come into now talking about planning for the expansion. So we've identified the leader. We talked about the right things that leader needs to have to be able to lead the business into global expansion. But in terms of the planning stages, Alison, some of the I know you do a lot of training courses in this, and you've worked with lots of businesses to help them plan. What are the key things that have to be considered in that planning stage?
Boy, there's so many things. I guess the most important are giving that international pursuit enough oxygen to be able to decide that it's viable. I think what happens very often is, if within 18 months
Yeah.
that international expansion hasn't, broken even, then the funding's cut off. And you just think, well, actually, it's got to be a minimum of 5 years. If it's less than 5 years, then please don't bother. Keep your money and invest in other things, but don't invest in international if you're not going to give it 5 years worth of funding and professional funding. So that's one.
Yes. Mm.
Uh, I think another key thing is doing your homework about that international market and knowing what you need to localize and what needs to stay the same
Yeah.
uh, as what already works in the home market or markets. And if you don't do that homework, firstly, there are no shortcuts.
Mm.
Everybody's always looking for, oh, can I do this faster, cheaper, less painfully? And I hate to say, but there really are no shortcuts. You've got to do the work. And you've got to go and immerse yourself in that target country and really know what it smells like, really observe people, really understand how they use and misuse your service or your product. And if you don't really have a granular grasp of that, then again, don't bother, stay home. And I guess the third thing I would say is sometimes companies treat the international expansion as a project. There's a committee assembled around it, a working group for how we're going to make international work. And actually, it's a fundamental part of the business strategy. It's not a working group, it's part of the business strategy. So, therefore, it has to be resourced properly with the right amount of talent, the right quality of the talent, the right amount of leadership attention around the boardroom. This is a big undertaking. This isn't just, oh, well, we're noticing we get a lot of sales in the US or in France, and therefore we're going to just set up an office. Not good enough. You really have to make the business case and back it with a professional level of resources.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the other key parts of planning, sometimes you can have a great plan, but if you haven't thought about how do we define or identify the critical success factors, then how do you know it's going well or not? And so sometimes people don't have a plan at all and just, go straight in. And those with a plan actually don't realize at what point we're hitting our milestones or this is actually successful for us. So it's defining what does success look like for you in terms of how you've helped businesses plan to enter new markets. What would you say some of those success factors are for international expansion?
Well, I think it's having done that market research. That's the critical one, because if you go in on assumptions and hunches rather than on the basis of having data, that you're not going to do well. So that's a critical success factor. I think another one is having the right culture, which tolerates experimentation and more than tolerates, actually encourages it.
Yeah.
So in the course of internationalizing, it's okay to make mistakes. And
Yeah.
frankly, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning.
Yeah.
But there are some corporate cultures that punish people for trying new things that don't work. So you really need to have a culture that's supportive, that's going to give it oxygen, and that is also interested in sharing the learning that comes out of the whole exercise. Because in a way, the goal of internationalizing, the journey is as important as the goal. And the business can learn a whole lot from the journey as much as being in that new market at the same time. So I think those are some of the critical success factors that, businesses ought to be thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. It's always been quite interesting to me how we're going to come on to research now because it's fundamental to the plan and the planning. If anything, actually, it happens before the plan. And it's always been surprising to me how businesses struggle to instigate the research or struggle to understand really where to start when it comes to the research. So what would your advice be in a business who needs to define how they go about researching a new market? What would your advice be?
So I think the first thing you can do, which is really affordable, is desk research. Using your web browser, putting in keywords, using, the AI tools that are now at all of our disposal, and trying to understand, who are the key players in your target country, the key competitors, what market shares do they have. A lot of this stuff is discoverable pretty
Yeah.
much for free. Uh,
Yeah.
by trawling what's already in the public domain. That's one. And I think also you can buy market research reports that already cover your industry for that particular
Yeah.
country. And you can fix phone calls and interviews with trade publications, trade associations
Yeah.
in target country. So it doesn't need to be expensive. I mean, I think people think, oh, market research, wow, we don't have a big budget for that. Doesn't matter. You don't need a big budget for that. What you do need is to start the process so that you have a hypothesis you
Yeah.
know you want to test. So the whole point is to come up with the problem statement. What is it
Yeah.
we're trying to solve? What is it we need to know? And then what are all the ways we could learn that information?
Yeah.
Some pay for, some are free. Some you rely on secondary sources by buying reports. Others you commission firsthand research by going into the market and doing, the interviews yourself.
Yeah.
So I think there are a whole lot of options, all of which have different price points, but no one
Yeah.
should be afraid that, oh, it just seems too daunting and too expensive. Actually, just do it. Start with a quick browser search,
Yeah.
and you'll be surprised at how much information comes back.
Yeah, definitely. And then I love that kind of the free tools that are at your disposal, the tools that you can pay for. And also often I find, using your network, who in your network has done this, and being able to speak to peers and other leaders. I know I've, hugely benefited from doing that as a leader. Speaking to your peers and understand what they learned, where they started, and also can they refer? I'm sure a lot of businesses that you work with come through referrals of who else you've worked with before. So I'd also add using your network to that as a key way to research as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thinking about the associations that you're a member of, your
Mm.
organization is likely a member of a chamber of commerce or some other professional body
Yeah,
and have incredible amounts of data about international markets usually.
yeah,
So, yeah, you should, start local if you like, and, tap the resources that are in your network absolutely
yeah.
is key. Yeah.
It's really interesting actually, because I think when I first went into international business was kind of just over 4 years ago now with PGC Group originally. And one of the things that I found is if a recruitment leader was to Google, how do I expand my recruitment business to the USA? There's always too much information out there. But until you do that and you start to just look at some, you kind of start to build up a question bank, and then it's working out who do I go to. And it's one of the reasons we've always been very supportive of pointing people in the right direction. It's not something we might do, but we know a good network of providers around us because we're in this industry that we're able to do that. So love that. That's great. We've got 6 minutes left. The time is flying by, Allyson. So, and I want to make sure we give enough minutes to talk about building a global brand. And being able to, and again, it comes back to planning and research, but being able to take your brand into new markets and finding that right balance between, I think you've spoken about this before, but that global consistency, but local relevance. So
Yeah.
would you like to share some thoughts on this with everyone listening?
Sure. One of the best examples, I really like it, is Nestle and Kit Kat.
Okay, yeah.
We all know Kit Kat here in the UK
Yeah.
as, a four-finger wafer uh, candy bar.
Yeah.
Covered in chocolate, and we know the wrapper is red and white, and we know it's usually like foil lined, and we know roughly how much it costs, and we know where we can buy it. Now, if you go to other parts of the world, especially Asia, so if you go to Japan, if you go to China, but Japan in particular, the gifting occasion for a Kit Kat bar actually exists. Now, you might think, why would I give anyone a Kit Kat bar as a gift? That seems really bizarre. But that's how it works there. And so Kit Kat exploited the gifting culture. And in fact, in the if anyone goes there and you haven't yet seen this, they come in a really nice box, the Kit Kat bar. And on the back of the box is a space like a postcard where you can write a personalized message to give this box of a Kit Kat bar to someone who passed an exam or just got married or some celebratory event. So that's one interesting thing about Kit Kat. It's still called Kit Kat. The typeface and the font and the essence of the logo stayed the same, but the packaging's changed. The other thing, though, that's interesting in Asia are the flavors. So there's wasabi Kit Kat, there's green tea Kit Kat, there's strawberry Kit Kat, there is a plum Kit Kat. It comes in all these different colors. I mean, it's really fascinating, the proliferation of that particular candy. Now, what's the point in terms of how do we localize? Now, that might be an extreme example, and you may not want your product or service proliferating to have so many variants that maybe for your business there are too many. But I think the key is recognizing that you can do things differently in other countries and ensure that this maybe 80-20 rule is maintained. And meaning 80% of the offering and the value proposition is core across all markets, and 20% can be localized by your leaders in those countries. Now, maybe you also set some guidelines about what they can and can't change, such as you can't change the logo, you can't change the name of the product, but you can change other aspects of it, and we'll give you permission to do that because that gives you local relevance. So I think being really clear about what people can tweak in other countries, but what has to stay core, those guidelines are really essential.
Yeah, definitely. I love that example. And again, I suppose this is coming back to similar points that we talked about, but that cultural intelligence in those local markets, and then how to strengthen your, resonance in that market. You need local knowledge. And so again, it's coming back to that. But in terms of the global brand, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm reminded of a story I heard from the founder of the baby food company, Ella's Kitchen. He and I were on the panel a couple of years ago together, and he was saying that what they learned was that American babies don't like fish. And they never would have known that other than, the market research never flagged that this was the case. And so they pulled the fish meal for babies from the US market because it just wasn't selling. And their research post launching there told them, American babies just don't like fish. Who would have thought something like that? But yeah. There are these idiosyncrasies that emerge, like the color of the packaging really counts in certain countries. The pack size really counts. The brand name really counts. So I think not assuming that what works at home works everywhere. It has to be a starting point.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. Thank you for sharing. I love those two stories about Kit Kat and Ella's Kitchen and why it matters to have that local resonance in the market. Wow, Allyson, we've covered so much in a short amount of time, and really we've really scratched just the surface as well. But before we wrap up, Allyson, if there was one piece of advice that you would want our audience to take away today, what would it be?
It would be to not be afraid, to see international expansion as a fantastic commercial opportunity and a personal opportunity for you to learn a lot. It just opens your eyes to the world, and why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah. Love it. Absolutely love it. Okay. Well, that's a wrap, everyone, on today's session. We've heard so much from Allyson, just covering some of the key points. We talked about leadership and self-awareness and, kind of making or breaking success of the leader. We talked about culture as well and being able to adapt to global and a local mindset and not one or the other. Also, just in terms of kind of the planning, I loved what you said, Alison, about giving the pursuit enough oxygen to decide if it's viable. And so it's really getting behind it with the right investment and the right amount of time to be able to prove its success, which you've said if it's less than 5 years, it's too short. When it comes to researching, Alison spoke about using local tools that are on your desk that are at your disposal for free. So Googling, doing the research, or using AI now, which can give you this information in a more intelligent and concise manner. Also then looking at paid research, trade publications, interviews with those publications or associations, buying your reports. And then we also spoke about using your network, peer-to-peer learning, and who can they refer you to help. And then we came on to talk about brands and making sure you have global consistency, but that you have local relevance, and what resonates in one market won't necessarily resonate in every market. And I love the last piece of advice of not to be afraid, and that it's a fantastic opportunity for the business, but also for the leader taking that on. It's a fantastic personal opportunity as well. If you're excited by what you've heard from Allyson, but you want to understand more, you can reach out to her directly on LinkedIn. Please do that. Or you can also access through her website, and we have the website address running along the bottom of our screens now. Now, actually, if you're at the stage that you're looking to engage your first local hire within a country or a new territory that you are entering, or you need to engage contractors and then you want help and able to support to engage or employ them, then please reach out to myself on LinkedIn, or you can access the QR code at the end of the session on the screen. But thank you so much, Allyson. It's been brilliant to talk to you again, and we appreciate your time on the show. Next month, we do have another great guest lined up, and we're going to be excited to release the details of that in the coming weeks. So please look out for that. But other than that, all I'll say is thank you again, everyone, for your participation in today's episode, and take care and goodbye.